I stood in the rain outside the chapel, holding my husband's ring, waiting for my mother to walk through the doors. Instead, my phone buzzed with a photo. It was a picture of my mom at a lavish birthday party across town, holding a glass of champagne, surrounded by laughing relatives. Below the photo, she texted, "Life is for the living, sweetie. Don't be so dramatic." That sentence severed whatever was left of my heart. But 6 months later, when a national headline revealed the massive secret my husband left behind in his estate, my mother showed up at my doorstep in a panic, expecting a cut of millions. She smiled, acting like nothing had ever happened. That's when I repeated those exact 7 words back to her, leaving her entirely ruined. Follow my story to the end, and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Clara. I'm 28 years old, and up until 6 months ago, I believed that love and loyalty were the bedrock of every family. For 5 incredible years, I was married to Mark. He was a quiet, brilliant software developer who preferred cozy weekend mornings over lavish galas. Mark didn't care about status or showing off, which was precisely why my mother never truly accepted him into our family. To her, a man's worth was measured entirely by his job title and the car he drove. But to me, Mark was my sanctuary, the one person who made me feel completely safe in a world driven by superficial expectations. We had built a quiet, steady life together in Sacramento, far away from the constant judgment of my mother's inner circle. But in a single afternoon, everything I loved was ripped away. It was a Tuesday when the police arrived at my front door. A sudden, catastrophic car accident on his way home from work took Mark's life instantly. In a heartbeat, my entire world shattered into pieces. Sitting on the edge of our bed, clutching his unwashed sweater to my chest, I felt a cold, suffocating isolation settle over me. I was a 28-year-old widow, completely broken, trying to figure out how to breathe in a world without the man who had been my entire strength. The morning I called my mother, Evelyn, to tell her about the funeral arrangements, I expected comfort. Instead, I was met with a heavy, irritated sigh over the receiver. "Clara," she said, her voice dripping with annoyance rather than grief. "You can't possibly host the service on Saturday. That's the exact weekend we rented the luxury yacht for your sister Chloe's 25th birthday party." I stood in disbelief as she explained that moving a party booked months in advance was simply impossible. When the day of the memorial arrived, the front pew beside me remained painfully empty. While I stood trembling beside Mark's casket, supported only by his loyal business partner, my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. A quick glance revealed social media notifications popping up left and right. Photos of my mother and Chloe clinking champagne glasses in the sun, captioned with, "Celebrating our favorite girl's special day." Not a single call. Not a single flower sent in Mark's memory. Just a short, cold text message from my mother late that afternoon. "Life goes on, Clara. Don't ruin Chloe's special day with your dark mood." Standing alone in that silent chapel, watching the rain fall against the stained glass windows, the initial numbness inside me began to harden into something sharp and icy. Have you ever experienced your own family turning their back on you when you needed them the most? Let me know in the comments below. Exactly 1 week after the funeral, the doorbell rang. I opened the door expecting a delivery, but found my mother standing on the porch, clutching a leather binder and a pair of oversized designer sunglasses. She didn't hug me. She didn't ask how I was sleeping. Instead, she pushed past me into the living room, her eyes scanning the space like an appraiser evaluating a foreclosed property. "We need to talk about practical matters, Clara," she said, setting her binder on the dining table. Mark was a software guy, so I assume he had a substantial life insurance policy and a few hidden investments. I stared at her, completely stunned by the cold calculation in her voice. When I told her that I was still processing my grief and wasn't ready to discuss finances, her expression hardened. She leaned across the table, her eyes narrowing into cold slits. "Don't play the fragile widow with me, Clara. Widows get rich off insurance payouts. You owe us for raising you, especially after embarrassing the whole family by skipping Chloe's birthday party to sit alone at a funeral." Those 6 words, "You owe us for raising you," echoed in my mind like a physical slap. In that moment, the last lingering threads of affection I held for my mother snapped completely. Instead of yelling or crying, a deep, silent calm washed over me. I looked her dead in the eye, quietly stood up, and opened the front door. "Leave," I said softly. She scoffed and walked out, confident she had intimidated me. She had no idea she had just declared war. The day after my mother's visit, I finally gathered the courage to open Mark's heavy steel safe in his home office. I expected to find standard documents, titles, tax returns, and basic insurance policies. Instead, I discovered that my quiet, humble husband had been far more strategic than anyone in my family could have ever imagined. Tucked behind a stack of personal journals was a thick manila folder labeled Whitaker Commercial Trust. As I read through the legal papers inside, my heart pounded. 3 years ago, my mother had launched a boutique retail chain, taking out massive loans to fund her lavish lifestyle. What she never realized was that Mark was the anonymous primary investor who had quietly purchased the commercial property where her flagship store operated. He hadn't done it out of spite. He had done it to protect our future. Mark had uncovered that my mother was systematically skimming funds from the business, inflating her revenues while defaulting on her underlying property fees. To safeguard us, Mark had transferred the commercial deed and all associated debt obligations into a revocable trust managed exclusively by me upon his death. Among the documents was a handwritten note from Mark. "Clara, if your mother ever tries to exploit you after I'm gone, this folder holds the truth. She owes $350,000 in defaulted business liabilities attached to this trust. Use this only if she forces your hand." Mark had left behind a brilliant legal trap. If Evelyn ever tried to claim a single penny of his estate, she would legally trigger the immediate repayment of her $350,000 debt, effectively bankrupting her entire operation overnight. I carefully closed the safe, holding the key tightly in my hand. My husband had given me the ultimate shield. 6 months passed, and I used every single day to rebuild my life in absolute silence. I moved into a modest townhouse on the edge of town, assumed full control of the commercial trust, and quietly let my mother believe she had intimidated me into submission. But greed has a funny way of making arrogant people careless. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the receptionist at the corporate firm where I managed the trust called my desk, her voice trembling. "Mrs. Whitaker, there's a woman named Evelyn here with a younger lady and a legal team. They're demanding to see you immediately." I smoothed down my blazer, took a deep breath, and walked toward the main conference room. When I opened the heavy glass doors, my mother was sitting at the head of the long mahogany table, wearing an expensive mink coat, with Chloe sitting beside her scrolling through her phone. Behind them stood a sharp-looking attorney adjusting his silk tie. "Clara," Evelyn announced, her voice echoing off the glass walls with supreme confidence. "We've waited 6 months for you to finish grieving. Chloe has accumulated significant credit card debts from her birthday travels, and my boutique needs fresh capital. As Mark's widow, you're sitting on liquid wealth that belongs to this family." She gestured toward her attorney, who slid a thick stack of demands across the table. "We're offering you a chance to settle this quietly, Clara. Sign over 50% of Mark's liquid assets today, or we will take you to court for financial concealment." I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I simply pulled out a chair, sat down, and set a single manila folder on the table between us. My attorney, James, opened the manila folder and slowly laid out 3 years of audited bank statements directly in front of my mother. "Mrs. Evelyn," James said, his voice smooth and ice-cold, "before you discuss taking my client to court, you should review these. These are the original ownership deeds for the commercial property housing your boutique chain, held under the Whitaker Commercial Trust. Furthermore, these forensic audits detail over $350,000 in unauthorized fund diversions and unpaid property liabilities under your name." The color completely drained from my mother's face. Chloe stopped scrolling on her phone, looking between her mother and the documents in utter confusion. "Mark owned your building," I said quietly, leaning forward across the table. and upon his passing, he left the trust entirely to me. You came here today demanding 50% of an imaginary fortune, but in reality, you owe this trust $350,000 in defaulted debt. James slid a final document across the mahogany table, a complete legal release. You have two choices today, Evelyn, James continued. You can sign this waiver immediately, permanently relinquishing any and all future claims against Mark's estate and agreeing to a strict repayment schedule for your commercial debt. Or, my client will file formal charges for financial fraud before the sun sets today. My mother's attorney scanned the audit papers, his eyes widening with every second. He leaned over to Evelyn and whispered, "Sign it.
Right now."
If this goes to court, you're looking at severe criminal prosecution." With trembling hands and tears of humiliation springing to her eyes, my mother picked up the pen and signed the paper. 3 months after that meeting, I sold my share in the commercial trust and moved to a quiet cottage in Carmel overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The proceeds gave me complete financial freedom, but more importantly, they gave me peace. Through my attorney, I learned that my mother had to downsize her lifestyle significantly to keep her business afloat, while Chloe was forced to get a real job to manage her own debts. They haven't tried to contact me since, and for the first time in my life, the silence feels like a blessing. I used a portion of Mark's legacy to establish a foundation that provides free legal and financial counseling to young widows navigating unexpected loss. Helping other women find their voice during their darkest hours has given my grief a purpose. I've learned that true family isn't defined by blood or social status. It's built on genuine love, respect, and loyalty. Mark protected me even when he wasn't here, and his love gave me the strength to stand up for myself. How would you have handled a mother like Evelyn? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more stories.